These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Thom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Thom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Thom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Thom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Thom.
book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Richard Wolff's Understanding Socialism. This is from the introduction. Socialism is a kind of yearning for a better life than what capitalism permits for most people. Socialist yearnings are as old as capitalism itself because they are its products. Where and when capitalism's problems and failings have accumulated criticism and critics, socialist voices have arisen. And so it is again now. Any serious discussion of socialism must begin by acknowledging socialism's rich diversity. Whatever particular aspect of socialism we choose to analyze, they need to be located within socialism's complexity. That avoids presenting one's own interpretation as if it were the entirety of socialism. In this book, I focus on the economic aspects of socialism, how it differs from capitalism in broad outlines. I'm more interested in socialist critiques of capitalism and their implications about socialist alternatives than in the particulars of the few early experiments in erecting socialist systems, USSR, People's Republic of China, and so on, that history so far offers. Finally, my own education and work constrain me to concentrate on Western Europe and North America. Some important aspects of socialism are thus not covered or discussed here. Yearnings for better lives, such as socialism proposes, are not new. In slave societies, the slaves hoped and dreamed of lives less hard and less out of their own control. Their yearning aimed to obtain freedom. They sought social change that would preclude any one person being the property of another. In feudal societies, the serfs, free in the sense that no one owned them, yearned for better lives too. Their subordination to lords included heavy labor and other burdens that they wanted lifted. They hoped and dreamed of a society in which they would not be bound to the land, the lord of that land, and the feudal dues of labor and subservience. The serfs mobilized in the 1789 French Revolution to demand liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In effect, the serfs had expanded on what the slaves had called freedom. In the American Revolution against British King George III, the revolutionaries were neither slaves nor serfs. They were mostly self-employed farmers, craftspeople, and merchants subject to a foreign feudal kingdom. They wanted liberty as individuals to pursue their dreams without hindrance from feudalism or monarchism, whether foreign or domestic. They added democracy to the goals advanced by the slaves and serfs before them. The different systems of slavery, feudalism, and small-scale self-employment produced masses of people yearning for better lives. Eventually, each of those systems provoked revolutions. Many people then sought to break away from and go beyond those systems. The French and American revolutions marked key moments in the social transformations of major pre-capitalist systems into capitalist ones. By capitalist system, we mean that particular organization of production in which the basic human relation is employer-employee instead of master-slave, lord-serf, or individual self-employment. The revolutionaries who wanted and built capitalism hoped and believed the transition to employer-employee relations of production would bring with them the liberty, equality, brotherhood, and democracy they had yearned for. The revolution's leaders promised to themselves and to the people they led that those goals would be achieved. But the transition to capitalist employer-employee relations that increasingly replaced the previous slave, feudal, and self-employment relations of production had unintended consequences. Capitalism soon proved to be different from what its revolutionaries had hoped. While it enabled some people to be more free and more independent than slaves, serf, or self-employed subjects of monarchies had been, it also seriously limited freedom, independence, and democracy for many. Capitalism betrayed many of the promises made by its advocates. It produced and reproduced great inequalities of income and wealth. Poverty proved to be as endemic as capitalism seemed equally adept at producing and reproducing both wealth and poverty. The capitalist rich used their wealth to shape and control politics and culture. Democratic forms hid very undemocratic content. The cyclical instability attending capitalism constantly threatened and hurt large numbers of people, and so on. Growing numbers of employees within capitalism began to yearn for better lives. They defined those yearnings first in the familiar terms of the earlier French and American revolutions: equality, fraternity, liberty, and democracy. They criticized a capitalism that failed to deliver those to most people and demanded social changes to achieve them. Many people still continue to want a better, softer, friendlier capitalism, where government regulates and intervenes to achieve more of what the French and American revolutionaries had yearned for and promised. They are also often self-defined as socialists. However, capitalism's development provoked another, different perspective that also called itself socialism. In that view, capitalism had not broken from slavery, feudalism, and monarchy nearly as much as its advocates had imagined. Slavery had masters-slaves, feudalism had lords-serfs, and monarchy had king-subjects as their key sources of their inequalities, lack of freedom, oppressions, and conflicts. The employer-employee relation of production and capitalism generated parallel problems. Capitalism installed monarchies inside individual workplaces, even as monarchies outside workplaces were rejected. Kings mostly disappeared, but inside workplaces, the owners or their designated boards of directors assumed king-like powers.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Tuesday. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. In the second hour of our program today, Julio Rivera is going to drop by. We're going to be discussing the fate and future of unions. Joe Biden just took a huge step we haven't seen since Lyndon Johnson's presidency. We'll tell you about that shortly. But first, Dr. Trita Parsi is with us. He's the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Been on the program many times over the years. An extraordinarily well-informed observer of the broadly the situation in the Middle East and with regard to Iran in particular. And Dr. Parsi, first of all, the website is quincyinst.org. And you can tweet Dr. Parsi at tparsi, P-A-R-S-I. Dr. Parsi, welcome back. I'm wondering if you could first just give us a shorthand kind of background on the situation with Iran from the deal that President Obama participated in, along with I believe it was 5 other nations in putting together, to Trump's blowing it up to where we're at right now, and then we can go forward with what's happening with Biden and this diplomacy. But just for those people who may not have been paying attention.
Sure. So for years, there's been tensions over Iran's nuclear program, and there was a major breakthrough in 2012, 2013 that laid the way for multilateral negotiations between the United States, Germany, France, the UK, Russia, China, and Iran. And 2015, they reached a landmark agreement that blocked all of Iran's pathways to a nuclear weapon, and at the same time lifted sanctions on Iran, rehabilitated the country politically. It was hailed by all countries with the exception of 3, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the UAE, 3 countries that incidentally have been pushing the United States to go to war with Iran. Trump comes in, he tears the agreement apart, walks out of it, reimposes sanctions on Iran, imposes further sanctions on Iran. After about a year, the Iranians start to reduce some of their obligations, and as a result, restarted elements of the program that they had kept dormant as a result of the deal. Biden comes in. He had promised that he would quickly get back into the agreement. It's part of the Democratic Party platform that there should be a quick rejoining of the nuclear agreement. We're 6 weeks into it. We have still not seen any clear gesture by the Biden administration to get back into the agreement. Instead, we're stuck on a rather childish fight as to who needs to take the first step, which is wasting very valuable time and is likely going to make the political cost and difficulty to get this deal up and running again all the more difficult.
Give us the details on that, who takes the first step dispute.
Well, so the Biden administration started messaging that they would get back into the deal if the Iranians reverse some of the steps that they have taken. The Iranians never left the deal. They've reduced some of their obligations. And Biden wants Iran to reverse all of those steps, be in complete compliance with the agreement before he takes any step at all.
You're talking their further enrichment of uranium, principally?
Enrichment of uranium, shipping out of that uranium, specific sites that have been closed, enrichment to higher levels, all kinds of different things that are very important that the Iranians have made very clear that they will reverse all of it, assuming that the U.S. goes back into the deal. And the Iranians are very worried, it seems like, because if they allow the United States to come back into the deal without lifting the sanctions that are actually violating the deal, and essentially continues to pursue Trump's maximum pressure strategy, then their fear is that if the talks then end up hitting a snag and not succeed and break down, they will be blamed for it, even though Biden actually never changed the policy of Trump. He continued to do exactly what Trump was doing, more or less, while getting the credit for simply wanting to talk, which Trump wanted to as well, but then the Iranians will get the full blame for it. So they've been resisting. Biden doesn't want to take the first step because he's afraid of looking weak and that Saudi Arabia and Israel and the UAE and Republicans will attack him. But at the same time, Biden did promise leadership, and leadership means taking the first step by definition. So there's an expectation that he would lead and take the first step now. And these issues, by the way, can be resolved easily behind the scenes. The problem is that once you make them public, which unfortunately the administration contributed to doing, then they become really tricky to resolve, because then it's all about saving political face.
Right, which takes us back to domestic politics. I believe Iran has a presidential election coming up this year, and certainly America is in a continuous cycle of political turmoil. To what extent are domestic politics driving these decisions on both sides?
Well, domestic politics is tremendously important, unfortunately, on both sides. The Iranians are in a tight situation. I mean, the Rouhani government only has a couple of effective months left. The elections are in June. By last 2 weeks of March, the Iranians are in an election season. As a result, cannot negotiate effectively. On this side, I think, unfortunately, the Biden administration seems to think that there is a way for them to strike a deal with Iran to actually get back into the JCPOA without paying a domestic political cost, without angering the Saudis and the Israelis and the UAE. And I simply don't think that's possible at all. I mean, Obama proved that it's not possible to do that. If you want this deal, you have to be ready to pay a political price for it. If you're not willing to pay the political price, then you shouldn't even pretend that you're interested in diplomacy.
What are you're talking about the Saudis, Israel, and the UAE. Biden has distanced himself from Netanyahu, who is, facing crises of his own as he's being prosecuted for corruption and other crimes. The Saudis, we just came out and pointed out that, Mr. Bonesaw ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And the UAE has, well, God only knows. I mean, certainly they played a big role with Jared Kushner's $1 billion. Why are we so concerned about those three countries in terms of pacifying them with regard to Iran?
I think it has a lot to do with how they can have an impact on domestic politics. But I want to say I absolutely agree with the premise of your question. It's a real question mark. Why are we willing to put their concerns and their interest and their preferences above the U.S.'s security interests? As Bill Clinton said after his first meeting with Netanyahu in 1996, who's the freaking superpower in this equation, in this relationship? Right. That seems to be a need of reminding here, because the Biden administration itself has said that this is a security imperative. We need to make sure that the Iranians don't have a pathway to a bomb. We need to avoid a war. And incidentally, perhaps even more importantly, the idea of striking this deal in order to avoid a war and avoid a weapon in Iran is absolutely imperative in order for the United States to be able to slowly but surely extract itself from the Middle East militarily, which is exactly what the American public wants. They don't want to have 58,000 troops in these endless wars in the Middle East. But without this agreement with Iran, it's a very difficult task to be able to achieve that. It's going to be difficult even with it, but it's necessary to have it because it's the one issue that actually can drag the United States back into a land war in the Middle East.
We have just 10 seconds. What can Americans do to encourage this process?
I think they can call their members of Congress and ask them to put pressure on the administration to live up to its promise to get back into the deal without causing complications.
Sounds like a plan. Dr. Trita Parsi, it's always great talking with you, sir. Thank you so much for dropping by today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
QuincyInst.org is the website. You can tweet Dr. Parsi at T-P-A-R-S-I, T Parsi, Dr. Trita Parsi. And we will be back with more of the news of the day, and there's a whole pile of it. Christopher Wray is testifying from the FBI right now.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Among other things. So stick around, we'll get to that. And also, what do you think about what's going on in the Middle East? And welcome back. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. I want to talk about Iran, of all things. I think Joe Biden's handling of Iran so far has been a complete disaster. In fact, I see pretty much no difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration on things like Iran, Venezuela, China, Russia. In fact, the same foreign policy seems to just be continuing from one administration to another. Anthony Blinken is a disaster. He's just as hawkish as Mike Pompeo. And Iran should, this whole...
Jared, nobody is as hawkish as Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo wants to be president, and he thought, bombing his way to something might get him there.
Well, I mean, when it comes to that, okay, so maybe not as hawkish, but he's definitely on the same path as Mike Pompeo in terms of how much more are we going to take of this, Western hubris that America can tell Iran, we can sanction it, we can tell them they can't have nuclear weapons, even though America and Israel have nuclear weapons, and America has actually used nuclear weapons, not just in warfare, but also on civilian populations.
Well, you have the entire planet. I mean, we've had several treaties. The UN is involved in this. The entire planet has been trying to dial back on nuclear weapons. I think the larger issue is, why are we taking the side of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the UAE against Iran, when what may be in America's interest would be to rejoin the European countries, Russia, and China, and putting back together this deal with Iran, and abandoning, as Dr. Parsi said, some of the purely punitive actions, particularly the sanctions that have been taken against Iran, that are not necessarily connected to that deal.
I already have the answer. Because imperialist interests of those countries and our own imperialist interests are not actually aligned with the interest of the American people. There was a huge lobbying effort from Iranians in exile in America. Look up the January 6th riots, and you'll see a whole bunch of Shah flags from these comprador Iranians in America, and you'll realize that a lot of our foreign policy is being run by these special interest groups, also, as Obama called it, the blob, and nothing's going to change.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Cubans, some of the Cubans in the United States who had property expropriated by Castro, 70 years ago. They still think they can get it back, and they're still working toward that. There are people who had property expropriated by, or appropriated, I guess is the proper word, by the Iranian government. They want it back. I get it. Jared, I got to run, but thank you. Thanks for the conversation. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the sane among us. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Astonishing news out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that has to do with the lifespan of Americans. Since World War II, the average lifespan of American men and women have continuously increased, all the way up to 78.8 years in 2019. Continuous increase. Things were getting better, more and more people were getting health care, we were making medical technology advances, there was a rather dramatic decline in smoking between the 1990s and the 2010s. All kinds of things were working together. And then came Donald Trump's response to COVID-19. Causing America, with 4% of the world's population, to have 20% of the world's deaths. The result of that has extraordinary. For the first time since World War II, American life expectancy has declined. It's all over in a new video for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A whole bunch of other stuff in the news. Right now, Christopher Wray is testifying before the Senate, and I watched it for about an hour. It's getting quite repetitive, which is the reason why we're not carrying it live right now. Basically, you had senators like Ted Cruz going, well, you know, there were 14,000 black people who were arrested in these Black Lives Matter protests throughout 2020, and you've only arrested 300 people in the Capitol. Seems like we got a bigger problem with all these black people and Black Lives Matter people and Antifa people in America. You know, and you had more than 700 police officers who were injured during all those riots all across America. I mean, you know, it's basically the Fox News story, right? And the majority of the arrests that happened during the Black Lives Matter protests following George Floyd's murder were not people being arrested for riot. They were not people being arrested for trying to bring down the government. They were not people being arrested for trying to beat on police officers. Mostly it was people who got kettled. They were arrested for trespassing. They were arrested for being, you know, in the streets and blocking traffic. You know, they were mostly nuisance arrests of the police officers who were injured. Many of them, I don't have the specific statistics in front of me right now, but many of them were injured by their own stuff, by their own tear gas and things like that. Yes, there are some folks on the left who believe that bringing down the whole system is the best way to bring about institutional change in America. To paraphrase Dwight Eisenhower, their number is small and they are stupid. But they are, by and large, and I knew folks like this. In fact, I was on the edge of folks like this back in the 60s. They created the Weather Underground and ran around and blew up buildings. Look at the wonderful results it produced, right? Nixon's Law and Order. It's just, you know, yeah, that's there, but it's pretty inconsequential. And most of it boils down to tagging buildings and smashing windows. And even that is really, really limited. I mean, we've got a couple of square blocks of Portland where this happened and a few square blocks of Seattle. And Fox News has tried to turn this into a nationwide massive uprising by Antifa and Black Lives Matter folks, with the emphasis on the word black. And so that was what we were hearing from the Republican senators today. They kept trying to get Chris Wray to say this, and he kept saying, well, you know, we're not saying... And so, you know, finally Chris Coons came along, and this was maybe 10 minutes ago, and said, let's just be clear. You know, in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, which is the focus of this hearing, were there any Black Lives Matter people? No. Any Antifa people? No. Any of them involved in the planning? No. Who was it? Well, it was mostly white supremacists and the so-called militia movement who are anti-government. So, anyhow, I just gave you the the essence of what's going on. And as I said, the reason why we're not carrying it live, because it has gotten, very, very repetitious. Well, and Chris Wray isn't the guy I want to hear from. The guy I want to hear from is Chris Miller. I want to hear from the acting Secretary of Defense, who issued the stand-down order on January 5th saying to the National Guard in D.C., you may not show up. And if you do show up, you may not arrest people, you may not use tear gas, you may not share your equipment with the Capitol Police, and you may not do basically anything to stop that crowd until you hear from me. And then repeatedly during a 6-hour period, there were multiple attempts by members of Congress and others to reach the acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, and say, please release the National Guard, put a stop to this. And he kept going, well, I don't really, call me back in an hour, let's talk. And, what's fairly clear to me is that what was going on was that Donald Trump engineered this thing, that the conspiracy meeting that they had with Tommy Tuberville and Don Jr. and all these guys at the Trump Hotel the night before on January 5th played a role in it. And I want to get right to that stuff. Let's have the FBI director come in and recite statistics to us. Come on, let's cut to the chase. Okay, number one. And, this is, in fact, Tucker Carlson told his audience, this was night before last, the attack did not constitute an armed insurrection, and he accused Democrats of relentless and coordinated campaigns to misrepresent that January 6th riot. And, of course, you all saw Ron Johnson, just lying through his teeth about it. The For the People Act is being amended right now in the House. In all probability, they will have a vote on it tomorrow. Amendment 84 restores voting rights to people with felony convictions nationwide. Amendment 157 includes early voting locations on college campuses. Amendment 26 blocks the Postal Service from any changes that slow delivery of ballots 120 days before elections. And Amendment 22 lowers the voting age to 16. So that debate is going on right now in the House. I think that's frankly more consequential.
The Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And meanwhile, we discover that the Republican Attorney General's Association was up to its eyeballs in getting ready for January 6th. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Day 2 of this week's Free Speech TV Pledge Drive. Time for you to vote with your phone. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. 877-378-8669. Call now and be part of Free Speech TV. One of the most disheartening statistics that I encounter is the number of people who are watching Free Speech TV, and we have a good sense of that. We've actually, hired companies to do like Nielsen tests. I shouldn't say we. Free Speech TV did. It's been a couple of years, but still, the numbers are there. Versus the number of people who actually call in and say, yes, I want to help out. And the number of people who call in and say they want to help out is a tiny, tiny single-digit percentage. A very low single-digit percentage. It varies from year to year, so I'm just going to say it that way. Of the number of people that we are pretty sure are watching. And frankly, I think it's even less than that. Now, that's not unusual. My radio program is also carried on nonprofit radio stations around the country, and I do fundraisers for them also. And, we find that similar dynamic. You'll hear that same complaint from your local public radio station. And it's one of the reasons why we need your help in getting more people watching Free Speech TV. If you can please make a commitment during this fund drive to not only help Free Speech TV financially, but also help Free Speech TV grow its viewing audience. And if you can't afford to help financially, here's something that you can do. Can you contribute an hour or two of your time this week to do outreach about Free Speech TV? Getting the word out about Free Speech TV on social media, posting things about it on Facebook, posting things about it on Twitter, posting things about it on whatever social media app you may use. writing about it to your friends, sending just a quick note to friends, neighbors, acquaintances, everybody on your contact list. Hey, I watch Free Speech TV every day. I watch the Thom Hartmann Program on Free Speech TV, and I get so much value from it. You ought to check it out. You can just go to freespeech.org, and you can see how to get it. If you've got Dish or Direct, you can easily get it right off your TV set. If you've got Roku or if you've got Sling, it's right there on your TV set. If you've got Apple TV, you can find it. But if not, you can still get it. You can get it on your computer. You can, cast that to your TV with Chromecast or Applecast or whatever. There's just all kinds of ways to watch Free Speech TV. Share that with your friends and neighbors. As we get more people watching, we will get more people donating. We get more people donating. We can shrink the length of these fund drives, and we can build Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is bringing on new programs. They just started a new program on Facebook Live. They have other new programs that, I saw Jim Hightower on there this morning. This is great stuff. Free Speech TV is really ripping up the pavement here. They're doing some marvelous work. And yet only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people who are consuming Free Speech TV are actually helping pay for it. You can pay for it in one of two ways. You can make a contribution. You can make one-time contributions or regular sustaining contributions, but you can make a contribution. Or you can help get just one other person or two or three more people to be regular viewers of this program or of this network or other programs on this network. If you think that, you have somebody who's a friend who's a total news junkie but isn't all that interested in opinion, point them to Amy Goodman's show. You want somebody who really wants to know what's going on other television networks and everything and hear brilliant kind of talk radio commentary about this? Randy Rhodes' program. If you want, I could go through the list. I realize that other people on Free Speech TV who represent free speeches in TV in general are already doing that. So I'll stop right there. But my point is, we need to expand our base. And to do that, we need your help. So there's that. Plus, we need cash. Free Speech TV needs money. They have to pay for sending all those electrons up to that satellite that bounces it back down to your house. They have to pay to pump it onto the internet so that you can watch it on your TV set. There are staff costs, there are engineering costs, there's building costs, there's media cost, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just go away because, we're doing good stuff. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With a $20 gift, you have your choice of the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Wildflower Seed Pack. You'll recall that yesterday we had a conversation about wildflowers. Here you go. With a $50 gift, there's the Free Speech TV webcam cover or the new tote bag. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann official program mug or the Free Speech TV hat. With $100, there's the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. $120, the Grow Social Change box, the T-shirt or my book Oligarchy. $240, the Monopolies and Oligarchy. $1,000, show up here. But call now, please. Call now. On the Science Revolution this week, Nick Dearden is here with Global Justice Now. Should America have a people's vaccine? Nick is calling for an immediate suspension of patents on COVID-19 vaccines and an international plan to ramp up production as rapidly as possible. Barry C. Lynn from Open Markets Institute drops by on how monopolies have created a crisis in the food industries. Zach Corrigan is here from Food and Water Justice on how pork slaughter plants with self-inspection rules are not working well and endangering our health. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just to restate something that I just kind of brushed over just before the break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here. HR 1, it's called the For the People Act. I got another email this morning from one of the right-wing groups that the Koch network funds, calling it the Gag Act, right? Because it's going to require that when billionaires pour money into politicians, down politicians' throats, that they be identified. Oh my God. We might find out which billionaires are giving how much money to which politicians. That would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just really gagging the right of free speech. But anyhow, it is being debated right now in the House of Representatives. This is a big deal, and it's important to call your member of the House of Representatives right now and the Senate, frankly. You have 2 senators and 1 member of the House, and let them know that H.R. 1, the For the People Act, is a high priority to you. If it is a very high priority for me, because this is basically the reinvention. Well, it's not specifically the reinvention of the Voting Rights Act. There's another piece of legislation that does a lot of that. But what it does is it clarifies, expands, and regularizes voting processes across the United States in ways that will basically make it easier to vote and keep it quite hard to vote in a way that is fraudulent. Nobody wants fraudulent voting. Nobody wants so-called voter fraud. Democrats don't want it. You know, the majority of it that was identified, for example, in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania found 4 people who were dead, who were voted, whose ballots were voted by their by their living relatives. 4 of them. 3 of those 4 cast votes for Donald Trump. So the majority of the voter fraud we know in this country, and the one instance of actual ballot harvesting that we've seen, where somebody went around from home to home and bought people's unfilled out ballots and then filled them out for a particular candidate and submitted them. That one instance in either North or South Carolina, pretty sure it was North Carolina, that was somebody acting on behalf of a Republican congressional candidate. So the vast majority of so-called voter fraud that happens in the United States happens by and on behalf of Republican candidates. So, you know, I don't want this going on. You don't want this going on. And the Republicans, of course, have been squealing about this since 1980 as an excuse to try to shut down voting, dial back on the number of polling places and things like that in predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhoods. But this H.R. 1, the For the People Act, it reduces the ability of individual state legislatures to engage in voter suppression. It does away largely, or dials back substantially, partisan gerrymandering, where you've got a situation where more than half of all the people who voted for a member of the House of Representatives in Wisconsin, for example, or in Pennsylvania, for example, voted for a Democrat, yet both those states sent a majority of members of to Congress of Republicans. Why? Because of gerrymandering. It promotes transparency around money in politics. It defines more clearly exactly what political corruption is and criminalizes it. And of course, all these are the reasons why the Koch network and other right-wing billionaires and groups like FreedomWorks are just hysterical about it and are calling it the Gag Act. And they just sent out a massive mailing this morning asking everybody to please call your member of Congress and tell them to stop the Gag Act, H.R. 1 in its tracks. Well, you need to be calling your member of Congress and saying, we would like H.R. 1 very much, thank you, please. And that number is 202-224-3121 to call Congress, 202-224-3121. And as if to highlight the importance of this, this is the latest, right? This is from a piece over on Alternate by Igor Darish. At least 253 bills with provisions restricting voting access have been introduced, pre-filed, or carried over in 43 states, mostly by Republicans, according to the Brennan Center. The Brennan Center notes that this is in response to, quote, a rash of baseless and racist allegations of voter fraud and election irregularities that former President Trump and his Republican allies promoted for months without any evidence. Mark Elias, who is one of the Democratic attorneys working on this, he's also the co-founder of Democracy Docket, one of the pro-voting rights Democratic group says, we're about to be hit with a tidal wave of voter suppression legislation by Republican legislatures across the country. We will see, as a result of that, a, quote, contraction of voting rights like we have not seen in recent memory. And this week, of course, the Supreme Court is hearing another case where Republicans in Arizona want to dial back on the rights of people to vote in Arizona, make it harder and harder to vote in Arizona. And we will find out exactly how partisan the 6 conservatives on the court are. Historically, they have voted along virtually entirely partisan lines. And I'm expecting that, that's going to continue. I mentioned the Republican Attorneys General Association, the RAGA, Republican Attorneys General Association. Turns out that they, in addition to a group, the Rule of Law Defense Fund, that is a subsidiary of RAGA, the Republican Attorney Generals Association, did a January 5th robocall to right-wingers on their list, encouraging people to show up at the Capitol on January 6th. They also held a secret war games event back in September to plan for what they were going to do, what Republican attorneys general were going to do if Trump lost the election on November 3rd. There were 44 senior attorneys general staff present, 32 in person and 12 virtually. They held 30 meetings for state attorney general senior staff between July of 2020 and mid-January of 2021, including one on January 5th, the day before the riots in the Capitol. 19 corporations paid for special access to Republican attorneys general and their staffs. RAGA's vice president, Mr. Schmidt, called that, quote, the business of making friends. Right. Elad Gross, who's a St. Louis attorney who found out much of this stuff with the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, said, quote, most states, if not all, have laws prohibiting the use of state employees for political purposes. It was incredible to see the degree to which they have been involved with the RAGA and its subsidiary. We found that a political dark money organization was coordinating with state officials and their staffs all across the country for many months prior to the January 6th Stop the Steal event. They continued to meet after the election right up through January 5th. And then he adds, probably the most amazing thing to me is how they were selling access to large campaign donors, giving $50,000 in many cases. Those donations were getting them official access, not only to attorneys general, Republican attorneys general, but also to their senior staffs. And then, for example, the Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, has touted in her online biography her role on the board of directors of a conservative group that's been criticized for its role in the insurrection in Washington, D.C., according to the Tampa Bay Times. Her official website for the Florida Attorney General details her role as, quote, recognized as a national leader among Republicans with the Rule of Law Defense Fund. That's the group that did the robocalls on January 5th saying, show up tomorrow in D.C. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. John in Los Angeles. Say, John, what's on your mind?
Oh, how you doing today? Thanks for being there. I just wanted to call you. You know, I was watching the CNN and Booze Cruise and KKK Josh, and now Tom Cotton's up there. Booze Cruise and Holly were seemingly to like trying to get information from the FBI, like how far has he got, like what it's almost like they're trying to cover up for their own tracks. Like they want to know what information they extracted from the money trail, and where can they provide that? It's like they're acting as FBI agents, and it's just a disbelief. And now Tom Cotton's up there. He's talking about Iran, Syria, North Korea. I thought this was about the storming of Capitol Hill, but I guess we live in two different worlds.
Yeah, that's why I've chosen not to carry this live, because it's the Republicans are just throwing chaff into the wind here. They're just trying to obfuscate the whole thing, and the Democrats are asking fairly obvious questions that we already know the answer to. Yes, it was white supremacists. Yes, it was racists. Yes, it was pro-Trump people. No, it wasn't Antifa. No, it wasn't Black Lives Matter. Yes, they killed people. Yes, I mean, it's just like tell me something I don't know. And occasionally there are hearings where there are things that we don't know and we learn about them, and I do carry those live on this program right now. But you're right, Tom Cotton is, is there a significant gang threat? He's talking about the brutality and savagery that we saw with the Black Lives Matter groups. Really? Yeah, John, thanks for your comments. We'll continue our conversation about all of the news of the day. I also have some more details on how Republicans are rewriting January 6th. We can get to that at the top of the next hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And in the next hour, I want to get into Joe Biden's support for the unions. This is a big deal. And of course, Julio Rivera will be here. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Michael in Los Angeles. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I suppose you heard Stevie Wonder's thinking of moving to Ghana. You heard that, right?
No, I didn't hear that.
Oh, well, it's been all over the news. Stevie Wonder saying he's going to move to Ghana. The whole thing with Oprah. Why do you think that's so?
I have no idea. Like I said, I have not read the story. I don't know anything about it.
Okay. Well, injustice. I mean, obviously, Stevie Wonder's been, doing a lot of things for blacks in this country through his music and activism, and now he's had enough. Okay, I'm on the left. You said earlier, I don't know where you get off dissing the Weather Underground and people who want to change the whole system. Okay, what has the Democratic Party done? What has capitalism done for blacks and the working class lately? Devastated us with climate change.
Yeah, Michael, if you want to tear down capitalism, what do you intend to replace it with?
What? Something. This is not working.
Yeah, something. Okay, brilliant. Yeah. If this is the level of dialogue, thanks but no thanks. Nilafar in Santa Monica, and where do I get off? Nilafar in Santa Monica. Hey, Nilafar, what's up?
Hi, I wanted to point out a few issues about the Iranian nuclear program.
Mm-hmm.
The Iranian government has always claimed that their project is peaceful and they don't have any plans for weaponizing it. And Mike Pompeo, as the head of CIA...
Are you sure they're saying that? Because they are enriching uranium right now beyond what they need to do for nuclear power.
They always said that, and they have always maintained that our nuclear project is for peaceful purposes. And okay. Mike Pompeo, as the head of CIA, when he was in front of the Senate to be confirmed...
He was the head of the State Department.
No, before that he was the head of CIA, and when he presented himself to the Senate for being confirmed for the State Department, for the Secretary of State, in his testimony, he confirmed that the Iranian nuclear project is peaceful. They had never planned to create a bomb, and they are not going about it. It's in an hour and a half in his testimony. It's between 1:30 and 1:35 minutes in his testimony. And on January 30th of 2018, when the head of American forces were in front of the Senate, they confirmed the same thing. Now, I don't know why we are having such a historical amnesia, and let's say we don't accept what the Iranian government says, but presumably Americans, when they go in front of the Congress, they are telling the truth. And here's the truth.
You can finish your thought, Nilafar.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, if Iran's intention is entirely peaceful, and any country right now that's aggressively trying to develop nuclear power very often is also trying to do that for nuclear weapons. But if their plans are peaceful, I mean, we need to be working with Iran. That's the bottom line. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So David Perry over at medium.com put together a list of 38 reasons to investigate the Trump administration. Everything from the Russian influence over the 2016 election to the Trump family's collusion with Russia to Ivanka Trump's trademarks to federal spending at Trump properties to the civilians killed by Trump's drone strikes to the Trump administration's role in turning the United States into the global epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we are. Yes, it's grim. Their decision to sideline the CDC, politicizing mask wearing just to try to get himself reelected, the number of people who died because the White House kept PPE from blue states, from Democratic-led states, the contents of the Trump documents that Trump refused to release to the House Judiciary Committee and other committees, all the people who wouldn't speak, at all, ignoring subpoenas, violations of the Hatch Act, the deportation of COVID-positive immigrant families, illegal altering of records. Anyhow, there's a whole list. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Paula in Miami, Florida. Hey, Paula, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You were talking about the new voter restriction laws. Well, I was watching MSNBC Sunday, and I think it was Arizona. They put the list of all the changes they're making to the voter laws, and the last line on the list said they had the right to overturn the results of the election. So they're pretty much saying if we lose again, we have the right to pick who we want to win.
That's correct.
But that's going to fly? I mean, I don't get that.
I think that's entirely possible that that's going to fly in Arizona. I mean, you've got some, really crazy right-wingers who have control of the legislature of that state. And it's not just going to be Arizona.
I know. If 31 states do that, why even have an election if they just overturn the results?
What you have now in the modern Republican Party is a political party, and it's been this way for 40 years. It's just that, for the last 35 years, they gave lip service to the idea of having, elections and respecting what you might call democracy in a republic. But what you have now is a Republican Party that just doesn't give a rat's ass about democracy. In fact, they openly are disdainful of it. They are full-out advocates for an oligarchic form of modern fascism. And this is something that is not going to... I just don't see how the Republican Party going forward can play any kind of constructive role in America using, as long as they're adhering to this kind of ideology. And frankly, I mean, they haven't played a constructive role going forward in America in my lifetime since 1961 when Dwight Eisenhower left. And even Eisenhower had his flaws, shall we say, but at least he was supportive of Social Security and unions and democracy, small d democracy. But I think, the larger issue right now is that the Republican Party is no longer a legitimate political party in the sense that they want to have a discussion about actual policy. CPAC is a great case in point. There was, as Democrats are preparing, or they just did in the House yesterday, passing a $1.9 trillion, it's being called a stimulus. It's not a stimulus. This is a rescue package. This is the equivalent of, helping out after a hurricane. It's rescuing Americans from the damage caused by COVID, while every other developed country in the world has been giving pretty much every citizen of their country who hasn't been able to work through the pandemic a couple of $1,000s a month to keep them whole, and in most cases somewhere between 60 and 90% of their entire monthly salary. The United States has done it twice, right? These two one-time payments, and we've slightly goosed up our unemployment benefits, which were already pathetic to begin with. And even that was not discussed at CPAC. The only thing that was discussed down there was, Donald Trump and Liz Cheney. And I mean, it's all about power. It's all about who gets to be the top dog. It's all about bullying. And none of it is about policy. We're not, CPAC at least used to pretend to have serious conversations about the minimum wage, about unionization, about, how do we provide health care in the United States. Usually their answers were, BS, but at least they pretended to have ideas and hold serious conversations. Now they're not even pretending. The Republican Party is not even pretending. Last year in 2020, the Republican Party didn't even have a platform that they ran on. They just, the Republican Party platform was, whatever Donald Trump wants is fine with us. They literally didn't have a platform. That has never, to the best of my knowledge, certainly in my lifetime, never before happened. And, whether they're going to be...
Win again? Will we ever
well, that's a good question.
Again?
The bottom line here, Paula, is that the GOP has become the party of white grievance and white supremacy. You can see it on display every single night on Fox News. You can hear it on right-wing hate radio. You can read it on right-wing blogs. This is the core of absolutely everything they have to say. And that's why they don't care about policy anymore. Because really it's all about white supremacy. And white supremacy is not being put forward as a specific policy. Now, the extent to which the promotion of white supremacy in America can have policies that impact it. For example, making it harder for people of color to vote. Well, the Republican Party's all in on that, and that's basically the only kind of legislation we're seeing passing through state houses, or the extent to which they can cut back on things in states that have large black populations, particularly in the South, where those people have been kept, black people have been kept in poverty for long, centuries. You find Republicans who are working to prevent the expansion of Medicaid and prevent the expansion of other kinds of so-called welfare programs that simply provide a floor under which, through which people don't fall. But that's it. I mean, the Republican Party has become the party of grievance and white supremacy and white supremacy-based extremist violence. Period. Full stop. And I don't know how they're going to pull back from this. There is because that has been at the core of American politics since our founding. Prior to the mid-1960s, the Democratic Party welcomed white supremacist terrorists into its ranks. It was called the Ku Klux Klan. You had Robert Byrd, who was a grand dragon of the Klan. He was in the U.S. Senate. After the 60s, it was the Republicans, and it is to this day. And now they're just getting frank about it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Thom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Thom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Thom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Thom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Thom.
Day 2 of this week's Free Speech TV Pledge Drive. Time for you to vote with your phone. 866, excuse me, let me start over again. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. 877-378-8669. Call now and be part of Free Speech TV. One of the most disheartening statistics that I encounter is the number of people who are watching Free Speech TV, and we have a good sense of that. We've actually, hired companies to do like Nielsen tests. I shouldn't say we. Free Speech TV did. It's been a couple of years, but still, the numbers are there. Versus the number of people who actually call in and say, yes, I want to help out. And the number of people who call in and say they want to help out is a tiny, tiny single-digit percentage. A very low single-digit percentage. It varies from year to year, so I'm just going to say it that way. Of the number of people that we are pretty sure are watching. And frankly, I think it's even less than that. Now, that's not unusual. My radio program is also carried on nonprofit radio stations around the country, and I do fundraisers for them also. And, we find that similar dynamic. You'll hear that same complaint from your local public radio station. And it's one of the reasons why we need your help in getting more people watching Free Speech TV. If you can please make a commitment during this fund drive to not only help Free Speech TV financially, but also help Free Speech TV grow its viewing audience. And if you can't afford to help financially, here's something that you can do. Can you contribute an hour or two of your time this week to do outreach about Free Speech TV? Getting the word out about Free Speech TV on social media, posting things about it on Facebook, posting things about it on Twitter, posting things about it on whatever social media app you may use, writing about it to your friends, sending just a quick note to friends, neighbors, acquaintances, everybody on your contact list. Hey, I watch Free Speech TV every day. I watch the Thom Hartmann Program on Free Speech TV, and I get so much value from it. You ought to check it out. You can just go to freespeech.org and you can see how to get it. If you've got Dish or Direct, you can easily get it right off your TV set. If you've got Roku or if you've got Sling, it's right there on your TV set. If you've got Apple TV, you can find it. But if not, you can still get it. You can get it on your computer. You can, cast that to your TV with Chromecast or Applecast or whatever. There's just all kinds of ways to watch Free Speech TV. Share that with your friends and neighbors. As we get more people watching, we will get more people donating. We get more people donating, we can shrink the length of these fund drives, and we can build Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is bringing on new programs. They just started a new program on Facebook Live. They have other new programs that, I saw Jim Hightower on there this morning. This is great stuff. Free Speech TV is really ripping up the pavement here. They're doing some marvelous work. And yet only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people who are consuming Free Speech TV are actually helping pay for it. You can pay for it in one of two ways. You can make a contribution. You can make one-time contributions or regular sustaining contributions, but you can make a contribution. Or you can help get just one other person or two or three more people to be regular viewers of this program or of this network or other programs on this network. If you think that, you have somebody who's a friend who's a total news junkie but isn't all that interested in opinion, point them to Amy Goodman's show. You want somebody who really wants to know what's going on other television networks and everything and hear brilliant kind of talk radio commentary about this? Randy Rhodes' program. If you want, I could go through the list. And I realize that other people on Free Speech TV who represent free speeches in TV in general are already doing that. So I'll stop right there. But my point is, we need to expand our base. And to do that, we need your help. So there's that. Plus, we need cash. Free Speech TV needs money. They have to pay for sending all those electrons up to that satellite that bounces it back down to your house. They have to pay to pump it onto the internet so that you can watch it on your TV set. There are staff costs, there are engineering costs, there's building costs, there's media cost, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just go away because, we're doing good stuff. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With a $20 gift, you have your choice of the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Wildflower Seed Pack. You'll recall that yesterday we had a conversation about wildflowers. Here you go. With a $50 gift, there's the Free Speech TV webcam cover or the new tote bag. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann official program mug or the Free Speech TV hat. With $100, there's the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. $120, the Grow Social Change box, the T-shirt or my book Oligarchy. $240, the Monopolies and Oligarchy. $1,000, show up here. But call now, please. Call now.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So yesterday, President Joe Biden said, speaking of the organizing drive by Amazon warehouse workers down in Alabama, he said, and I quote, "Today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama and all across America are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. There should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda." The fact is that anti-union propaganda is literally a multi-billion-dollar industry. Amazon is paying people over $3,000 a day to promote anti-union propaganda to and among these workers down there, which is pretty mind-boggling. So, what do conservatives have against workers organizing? Management organizes. Corporations are organized money. Why can't, if corporations are organized money, why can't we have organized workers who can balance that out? On the line with us is Julio Rivera, the editorial director at Reactionary Times, contributor to Newsmax, American Thinker, and Townhall.com, reactionarytimes.com, his website, or his Twitter handle, rather. Oh, yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back. So what's wrong with unions? Why should American workers not be allowed to join together and have representation in their workplace?
Okay, well, first of all, Tom, we don't live in, the 1800s or the early 1900s where unions really were useful because, working conditions were dangerous back at that time. But let me just give you some recent historical information. The United Commercial Workers, Commercial Food and Workers Union has actually done more damage to the workers. Basically, a lot of workers have lost their jobs during the pandemic. What wound up happening is that they've been pushing for a higher pay from certain, groceries chains and whatnot. And what wound up happening is they pressured in Long Beach, California. They pressured the local government there to create an ordinance looking to pay grocery workers $4 extra an hour, which wound up leading to two grocery stores, 2 Kroger locations closing. So what winds up happening is they put a lot of
$4 an hour broke a multi-billion-dollar corporation? Is that what you're trying to tell me, Julio? And by the way, if you say you're saying that back in the 1800s, when people were getting killed on the job, that unions were providing a useful function. Have you paid attention at all to what's going on in meat packing plants in America right now? There's some of the deadliest. Certainly, it's a deadlier job than being a police officer.
No, it's not. And I don't hear about people dying constantly, cutting meat. But anyway, well, let me make another
But even
here.
if people aren't dying, don't they have the right to have some say over how they're treated in the workplace?
I haven't heard anything about that, and I'm not going to let you throw me a curveball here. I'm going to stick to my point. The point I want to make, though, Tom, and this is a very serious one, is that these corporations are only going to put out as much money on payroll as they deem necessary for their profit margins. And that's what it boils boils down to. You can't sit there and force a company, a private business, to do business in the way that you'd like them to do it.
Yes, you can.
Ultimately, that's going to lead to less jobs. They're going to.
No, we do that all the time, Julio. We do that with minimum wage laws. We do that with safety laws.
Well,
and by the way, if they can't get people to work for them, I mean, these corporations, they don't have anything without workers. Workers are who produce the goods and services that these fat cats are getting rich off of. Kroger's among them, a multi-billion-dollar, insanely profitable corporation. And if $4 an hour is breaking them, they need to go out of business and let somebody come in like Costco who knows how to run a business.
Yo, let me tell you something about Costco. I'm glad you bring that up, because in that ordinance that the city of Long Beach actually put forth, Walmart and Costco were actually exempt from having to provide that extra $4 an hour. So these cities are actually, when they're putting together these laws, much like legislation in Washington, D.C.
This is not unionization that you're trying to debate here with me, Julio. We're not talking about a law in Long Beach. We're talking about the right of people to have a union. Republicans hate it. Democrats like it.
Tom? They're a political machine. All they wind up doing is collecting a whole bunch of dues from these workers. They don't really provide much of a service to a lot of these workers, other than getting them fired. Because
I think union members would strongly disagree with you.
Salaries, they will downsize in staff. So there's people out there. Listen, these unions, and I'll use the UCFW example again. During the pandemic, when people were losing their jobs, they didn't do anything to cut back on the collection dues. That would have immediately probably saved jobs. The companies could have temporarily dropped salaries, to offset the not collecting dues for a short period. These unions, all they do is they contribute money to politicians to do this for the politicians.
So give me, Julio, I still haven't heard an answer to my question. Why should people not have the right to unionize if they choose to?
Well, listen, I'm not saying they don't have the right to unionize, but they have to live with the consequences of it. If they sit there and they fight these corporations,
they're perfectly willing to do that. Why is it that Republicans are constantly opposing the right of workers to unionize? You've got I believe it's 34 states now, it might be 22, that have these so-called right.
Unions taking $3 off of your $15 an hour pay. You're effectively making $12 an hour. Now these unions.
But without that union, you would have been making $9 an hour.
What was that?
Without that union, you would have been making $9 an hour.
No, that's not necessarily.
That seems like a bargain to me.
Companies don't want to hire lazy people. They want to hire good workers that earn the money that they actually pay. It doesn't behoove the company to hire a.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me, Julio, that unionized workers are lazy? That somehow having representation in the workplace? When CEOs get together and form a corporation, does that make them lazy too?
Listen, that's not what the example is. We're talking about, end workers, like people who are going to work in, let's say, the Amazon factory. In the Amazon factory, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and all these fat cats, as you like to call them, are only willing to expend but so much money for that workforce. So what's going to wind up happening is if they unionize and they force, you got to pay us at this rate or we're going to strike and you're not going to have anybody to work that factory, they're going to wind up leading to massive layoffs. They're going to say, okay, we're only.
No, they're going to wind up getting benefits. That's how it has worked for over 100 years.
Well, listen,
how do you think that, Julio, it was unions who brought us the 2-day weekend. It was unions who brought us the 8-hour day. It was the unions who brought us the 40-hour week. It was unions who brought us workplace safety rules. It was unions who brought us the minimum wage.
And what have you done
unions have done.
Get people fired. They sit there and they fight for an extra $1, an extra $2, an extra $3. To those corporations, they're going to be like, okay, well, we don't have extra money, so we will pay the individual worker that much.
No, this is not about money. This is about power.
Fire people. Fire people. Would you rather have more people employed or less people employed, Tom? And let me tell you something. That 20% or 15% or whatever it is that the union takes off of the top from that salary, I mean, do they really earn that money? Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Unions
are democracies, Julio.
Their importance? That's my question.
Unions are democracies. They are absolute democracies. Unions elect their own leadership. Unions, the rank and file of the unions determine their policies. So you're anti-democracy now too.
Tom, you talk like a guy who's never started a small business, and I know that's a lie because I know you have, and I know you have a smart business mind. You can't possibly believe that unions are still as relevant and as necessary as they were 100 years ago. That is just
I do. In fact, I think they're more important now than ever before, particularly with the ability of companies like Amazon to hyper-surveil people. But anyhow, Julio, thanks for dropping by. It's always good.
That's another argument, which I do agree with. They shouldn't have that right.
Okay, well, the union would be fighting that. Julio Rivera, reactionarytimes.com. Oh, yeah, it's Julio on Twitter. Thanks, Julio.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Good talking with you. We'll be right back. It's 16 coming up on, well, it's 15 minutes past the hour. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Peter in Newport, Oregon. It says here you disagree with me about what?
Yeah. Hey, it's Pete. But side note, my dad, after paying 20 years into union dues, decided to join in the fight because they weren't going to give anybody raises, and he ended up getting all the staff a 5% raise. So, yeah, it does work. But I love your show, and I tell a lot of people about it and open my eyes. But I take issue with your opinion on the Electoral College because I feel like I live in Newport. It's a small rural area here in Oregon, and I lived in Chicago before that. And I feel like the Electoral College speaks for nature rather than only for the people. Because when I lived in Chicago,
nonsense.
Well, can I finish?
Sure.
When I lived in Chicago, I didn't think anything about the vacant land that was out there. But out here in Oregon, I hike, I bike, I hunt on national forests, BLM land, privately owned forests, and the national popular vote is literally a miniature version of the Electoral College. You and I didn't get a vote when our legislature decided to have us join the Electoral College. And so how is that any different than what's going on in Arizona, other than it's the opposite?
The national popular vote, the effect of the national popular vote is that whoever gets the most votes in America becomes president. We have not had that happen, at least for a Republican candidate, since 1982. And so either you believe in democracy or you don't, Pete. I mean, if you believe in democracy, then you think the person who gets the most votes should be president. That's what the national popular vote does.
I believe in a constitutional republic. And so, for example, if the people that are in the big cities that have no idea what it's like to be in a place like Oregon, I knew nothing about Oregon until I moved here. But if those folks are the ones who are the majority of the voters, there's no reason to vote in ways that help keep, let's say, private logging land like Starker, that opens it up for free to anyone who wants to recreate. So the problem I see is if each state had voted, what you're arguing for, Pete, is not what you're arguing for is policy. What I'm saying, and you can have that debate. Those are laws that states pass. Those are laws that the federal government passes. Those are rules that the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Interior pass. Those are things that you can become an activist around. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party would rather we didn't have private lands, or public lands, rather. And everything got fenced off, which is going to work to the disadvantage of rural areas, by the way. Let them privatize Mount Hood, right? To give you an idea,
but
hold on.
I'm
not arguing for the Electoral College as it is. I think we should have a representative Electoral College. Those folks that represent our state representatives are split based on the vote in the state, and the 2 that are from the senators go to whatever the majority of the state votes.
Yeah, and so Wyoming, a senator from Wyoming represents 34 more times more power than a senator from California. How is that fair? The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them. So with some fancy footwork math, you can take the GDP of the United States, the productivity, the amount of wealth that is produced or goods and services that are produced every year by American workers, and divide it by the number of workers, and what you get is that the average worker in America is producing about $75 an hour worth of value for their employer. And the minimum wage pays them about 10% of that value. Now, back in 1950, the minimum wage paid 30% of the value of the productivity that the average worker is producing for their employer. If we took the minimum wage up to $15 an hour tomorrow, it would still be in the neighborhood of 20%. So there's a strong case for increasing the minimum wage based on history. I lay this all out in the new video that we have just for our people who are supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Mark Sumner is writing over at Daily Kos about this new phrase, PASC, P-A-S-C. Get ready to start hearing about PASC. It is post-acute sequelae, if I'm pronouncing that right, of COVID. In other words, long-haul syndrome. It looks like between 20 and 30% of everybody who gets COVID, and we're talking mild cases here, not the hospitalized cases, ends up with these long-term symptoms like arthritis, arthritis-like pain in their joints, bone-wearying fatigue, ongoing difficulty in breathing, recurring fevers, hair loss, inability to get erections, double vision. This is happening to like 20 or 30% of people. What was amazing, yesterday I saw the statistic that some 70% of Democrats say they want a vaccine. Only 35% of Republicans say that they're going to take the vaccine. So we're going to have so you're going to have what, 70%, some more or less of Republicans who are going to be suffering hair loss and erectile dysfunction on an ongoing basis. I mean, this is just crazy. And then we discover that Donald Trump got his and Melania got their vaccines while they were still in the White House and didn't want to tell anybody. Is this a plot to kill off Republican voters or to simply render them impotent and unable to work? I mean, it's just astonishing. But the bottom line is, as many of us need to get vaccinated as we possibly can. It's just got to happen. The other thing with regard to the unions, and I want to go back to this. Joe Biden yesterday said today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama and all across America are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. There should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda. And I mean, this is a big deal. In fact, one of the first things Joe Biden did is he fired Peter Robb as the general counsel for the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, that was created back in 1935 with the Wagner Act. Trump had put Robb there because Peter Robb was the guy working for Ronald Reagan who helped engineer the destruction of Patco. And later in his first week, now it's increasingly looking like in Joe Biden, and again, I keep saying these things that I never thought I would say. I was opposed to Joe Biden in the primary. I thought he was going to be Casper Milquetoast, Mr. Corporate. I thought we were going to have another presidency like Bill Clinton's that would just guarantee more Republican victories. And so far, there have been some areas where he hasn't quite been as forceful as I'd like. But by and large, I've been very impressed. And here's another thing. In his first week, Biden signed an executive order that guaranteed all federal employees $15 an hour minimum wage, and guaranteed all federal contractors bargaining rights and a $15 minimum wage, which is mind-boggling. I mean, Bernie was the one who pointed out that the people working in the gift shops in the federal buildings were actually making $7 an hour because they were, or maybe $8 or $9 an hour, because they were working for contractors that had been hired by the federal government back during Republican administrations. They didn't want more federal employees, so they hired, Republican crony contracting companies, paid them as if they were paying $15 an hour, and then those companies paid people $8, $9 an hour, and that's how they made their profit. I mean, this incredible scam. Biden just put an end to that. Most developed countries have a unionization rate between 60 and 90%. Here in the United States, the unionization rate in the private workforce is 6%. When Reagan came into office in '81, he had two missions. Number one, defund the Democratic Party. Number two, reduce the wealth and therefore the political influence and power of the American middle class. He accomplished both with one job, with one action, and that was destroying the union movement in the United States. If we want to bring back real democracy, and in this case, democracy in the workplace, where workers have a say in how companies run. We talk about, hey, one of the great alternatives to capitalism, Richard Wolff is on about this all the time, one of the great alternatives to capitalism is worker-owned workplaces, basically employee-owned co-ops. And that is absolutely true. I wrote an entire book about this called Threshold. And the last chapter, I traveled literally all over the world. Louise and I did. We went to Mondragon in Spain. We went up across America, visiting a worker-owned tool and die shop, a worker-owned union, a cab company, worker-owned washing machine manufacturers. It's a great solution. But you're not going to immediately turn, Amazon into a worker-owned company. But at least you can get a union in there and bring some democracy into that workplace. Step one. And now, finally, after 40 years, we have a president who is saying, let's reverse this Reagan policy of destroying labor unions. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a great thing. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Stick around. We'll be right back with your calls. Day two of this week's Free Speech TV Pledge Drive. Time for you to vote with your phone. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. 877-378-8669. Call now and be part of Free Speech TV. One of the most disheartening statistics that I encounter is the number of people who are watching Free Speech TV, and we have a good sense of that. We've actually, hired companies to do like Nielsen tests. I shouldn't say we. Free Speech TV did. It's been a couple of years, but still, the numbers are there. Versus the number of people who actually call in and say, yes, I want to help out. And the number of people who call in and say they want to help out is a tiny, tiny single-digit percentage. A very low single-digit percentage. It varies from year to year, so I'm just going to say it that way. Of the number of people that we are pretty sure are watching. And frankly, I think it's even less than that. Now, that's not unusual. My radio program is also carried on nonprofit radio stations around the country, and I do fundraisers for them also. And, we find that similar dynamic. You'll hear that same complaint from your local public radio station. And it's one of the reasons why we need your help in getting more people watching Free Speech TV. If you can please make a commitment during this fund drive to not only help Free Speech TV financially, but also help Free Speech TV grow its viewing audience. And if you can't afford to help financially, here's something that you can do. Can you contribute an hour or two of your time this week to do outreach about Free Speech TV? Getting the word out about Free Speech TV on social media, posting things about it on Facebook, posting things about it on Twitter, posting things about it on whatever social media app you may use, writing about it to your friends, sending just a quick note to friends, neighbors, acquaintances, everybody on your contact list. Hey, I watch Free Speech TV every day. I watch the Thom Hartmann program on Free Speech TV, and I get so much value from it. You ought to check it out. You can just go to freespeech.org and you can see how to get it. If you've got Dish or Direct, you can easily get it right off your TV set. If you've got Roku or if you've got Sling, it's right there on your TV set. If you've got Apple TV, you can find it. But if not, you can still get it. You can get it on your computer. You can, cast that to your TV with Chromecast or Applecast or whatever. There's just all kinds of ways to watch Free Speech TV. Share that with your friends and neighbors. As we get more people watching, we will get more people donating. We get more people donating, we can shrink the length of these fund drives, and we can build Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is bringing on new programs. They just started a new program on Facebook Live. They have other new programs that, I saw Jim Hightower on there this morning. This is great stuff. Free Speech TV is really ripping up the pavement here. They're doing some marvelous work. And yet only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people who are consuming Free Speech TV are actually helping pay for it. You can pay for it in one of two ways. You can make a contribution. You can make one-time contributions or regular sustaining contributions, but you can make a contribution. Or you can help get just one other person or two or three more people to be regular viewers of this program or of this network or other programs on this network. If you think that, you have somebody who's a friend who's a total news junkie but isn't all that interested in opinion, point them to Amy Goodman's show. You want somebody who really wants to know what's going on other television networks and everything and hear brilliant kind of talk radio commentary about this? Randy Rhodes' program. If you want, I could go through the list. And I realize that other people on Free Speech TV who represent free speeches in TV in general are already doing that. So I'll stop right there. But my point is, we need to expand our base. And to do that, we need your help. So there's that. Plus, we need cash. Free Speech TV needs money. They have to pay for sending all those electrons up to that satellite that bounces it back down to your house. They have to pay to pump it onto the internet so that you can watch it on your TV set. There are staff costs, there are engineering costs, there's building costs, there's media cost, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just go away because, we're doing good stuff. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With a $20 gift, you have your choice of the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Wildflower Seed Pack. You'll recall that yesterday we had a conversation about wildflowers. Here you go. With a $50 gift, there's the Free Speech TV webcam cover or the new tote bag. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann official program mug or the Free Speech TV hat. With $100, there's the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. $120, the Grow Social Change box, the T-shirt or my book Oligarchy. $240, the Monopolies and Oligarchy. $1,000, show up here. But call now, please. Call now. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann program. Gretchen Reynolds over at the New York Times has been compiling for the last year or so, maybe a little longer, but I've been noticing it for the last year, some just remarkable statistics and information coming out of peer-reviewed scientific journals about the benefits of very, very small, short amounts of exercise on the quality of life and the lifespan, the ability to survive disease of all of us. Frankly, some of the studies were on younger people. A lot of the studies were on people over 50. And I'm talking very small amounts of exercise, like literally 4 minutes of bicycling, or 4 seconds, of bicycling really hard on a stationary bicycle, followed by 56 seconds of just relaxing, and doing that 15 times, over a 15-minute period, a couple of times a week. 4 seconds of exercise produce measurable results. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. We got a new video up for the people who are supporters of our program. You can check it out. Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you and James in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, so much is on my mind, but I sure appreciate you contributing to the national dialogue. You are great. Thank you so much. Do you really think the 16-year-old voting bill has much of a chance?
No. I think that the odds are that amendment will be shot down. I don't think the Democrats, I think that what they're going to try to do with this, with H.R. 1 is pass things that are, at least among Democrats, uncontroversial. And 16-year-old voting is still controversial.
Well, I can see the argument for it. But I guess
I can build a strong argument for it. These are the people who are going to inherit the future of our country. The argument against it is that most 16-year-olds are still living with their parents and are probably heavily influenced by their parents' political views. But, hey, you could say that about spouses. I'm influenced by Louise. She's influenced by me. I mean, there's got to be some reasonable cutoff. And by and large, we consider 18 to be the age of majority. It's the age at which you can get married. It's the age that you can drink. It's the age that you can vote in most states. And so I don't think that was just one of a long list. There's actually probably going to be over 100 amendments proposed today. And, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be one of them that's going to get in there.
Well, I love, at least I love that they're thinking about it. But
yeah,
I also, if Arizona,
by the way, there are places where 16-year-olds can vote. There are municipalities. I don't believe that there's any states yet that allow 16-year-olds to vote in statewide elections, but there are towns that allow 16-year-olds to vote. So it's not a totally alien idea here in the United States.
But it I think they're few and far between. I also wanted to ask you, wouldn't a federal judge and the Supreme Court find unconstitutional if Arizona actually passes a law that says elected officials can overturn an election? A free and honest and open election.
You would think. I mean, we're getting into really technical stuff here, and I'm looking for the, let's see, it would be in Article 2. And, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives. And that's basically it. But no senator or representative can be an elector. So, if they're electing essentially partisan electors, which is how it's kind of evolved over time, then arguably, this is the argument that was made in Bush v. Gore. It wasn't the essence of that decision, but it was made, was that, and it's certainly the argument that Republicans are making right now, that Donald Trump was making, that was being made on behalf of Donald Trump in multiple states, got shot down again by judges, was that states get to decide who their electors, which electors they send, and of course the electors are already partisanly bound to individual persons. So, but this will be a test of how extreme the right wing on the Supreme Court is. So, We shall see. James, thanks for the call. Russell in Lake Jackson, Texas. Hey, Russell, what's up?
Hey, Tom, several things. But first, let me say
Russell?
this with Julio, the caller, and having been a long-time union member, the one thing it's, I think, is being lost in it, I don't have a lot of time for this because I have other things to get to, but as far as, being vocational schools, the skill set, the health and safety, where we were seeing for a long time there were a lot of cranes all over the, various states and cities in the country that were fallen, went through rashes. There's just something to say for having those vocational schools. Not that a person can go out and you take them to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy them a tool pouch, and 4 or 5 years later they know what they're doing. I mean, but with licensed technicians, I mean, there's a lot to say for the union. Set aside from the fact that you pay dues and you've got you're gonna retirement. And I could go on and on about it, but I want to get to this partisan, nonpartisan shit. What I've noticed is, and the thing that I was telling your screen was, it seems that regardless of and I know Biden made that, saying he's going to be the president for all. And I would love for us to have a country where it's truly going to be that way from both sides. I think we need the Republican Party, but to hear them, at CPAC and Donald Trump talking about there's only one Republican Party and still people preaching the steal and just everything. You're some of these people like Holly and Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, regardless of what you do, you're not going to please them. What I don't want to see, and I'm like you, I think they've done real well as far as the vaccine. I could just imagine if we were in a second term of a Trump administration where we would be with this rollout right now. We wouldn't even be close to getting closer to herd with the amount of people vaccinated.
We'd be closing in on 1 million dead people.
Exactly. And then because they were in denial and they held super spread rallies, and people seem to want to forget that. But the bottom line is, Tom, we had agendas. There were 80+ million people that voted for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And what we need to make sure is, if it means playing a little hardball, if it means, hell, if they can't tell the truth with Director Wray, and like you said, it becomes repetition, what we need to do is make sure that we're, trying to do the right thing. And for the majority of the people and the ones that voted for this package, there's 70-some-odd million, for the 70% of Americans that are for this package to roll out. I know they're saying it's a waste of money and there's still money sitting around. Well, where is it? And let's use it. But the bottom line is we've got to get back on track, and we've got to get the hatred away from neighbors, coworkers, family members. There's still a lot of that dissension that people they're wanting to sweep under the rug, and we can't until we quit, telling lies and telling the truth about the simple things in America.
I'm with you. Donald Trump poured poison into our political swimming pool, as it were, and it needs to be purged. Carl in Lyndonville, Vermont. Hey, Carl, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I was listening to Julio, and obviously he's never worked in a union or a company that has a union. I was a UPS driver for 34 years, and I'm retired now. I have a pension. They paid my health care. It's a contract between management and labor and holds both parties accountable. We still have to produce as labor, and they have to play by the rules, because it's in like Amazon, that's time sensitive, just like UPS deliveries are. And when it's time sensitive, there's a lot of pressure, and there's an inclination to abuse that, especially from the management end. I was a shop steward, so they would intimidate. They try to bring you up and intimidate you because your production isn't where they think it should be. But what the contract makes them do is go out, work with a driver. Management has to go out with a driver and prove that production can be done safely, instead of just relying on intimidation or you're going to be fired. And with union companies, and because my dad was a stone cutter for 40 years, a union stone cutter, there is lower turnover rates in these unionized companies because they want to stay because they get paid better.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And
my dad was a union machinist for 40 years. He worked in a tool and die shop, and it was a 13-person shop. My dad part-time did the bookkeeping as well, for this little company that was owned by a local rich guy, and he negotiated their contract every year, and as a result, I mean, I have 3 younger brothers. All 4 of us are union members. And 2 of my brothers became shop stewards. And my 3 younger brothers, they're all younger than me. They are all, one of them is, the youngest one, who's 62, is going to retire in about 3 weeks. And all of them have retired, not just with Social Security, but with really good pensions. These guys, my brothers, have good retirements because, they all grew up in Michigan. It was a union state. They all had good union jobs. And they're they're living the American dream. It's just like we need unions, Carl. We need unions.
We do.
Carl, I got to run, but thanks for the call and spot on. 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where smart people get their news. Back with more of the news and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And just hang on just 1 second here as I try to fix my latency problem. There we go. Oh, we're not bad. We're down to 200 microseconds. Let's see. Picking up your phone calls and trying to see who's been holding the longest here. Courtney in Brooklyn. Hey, Courtney. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. I have a challenge question for you here.
Hey, Courtney.
I've been on unemployment and everything for quite some time due to the pandemic, and I'm sure other people have been in the same predicament. I recently went to the tax office, and I'm basically in a position of I'm paying back taxes, and I'm not complaining about it or anything, but what stuck in my mind was there was a young lady that was doing the taxes before me. And the amount she has to pay back is even higher. So, I'm just taking this into account, and I want to ask you, what are the implications of this when it comes to the, and when it comes to policy and politics and the statistics about these things, being that people, working class people, and being on unemployment and having this, with the COVID relief in effect and everything, people are still in a position where they have to pay back taxes for being on unemployment. And I just want to know what implications that has in comparison to to the low corporate tax rate, and the fact that a lot of corporations go through put a lot of effort in evading their taxes, not to mention Donald Trump and his behavior.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Courtney. There are 2 categories of income that are unique to, or largely unique to middle class, working class Americans, and that's Social Security income and unemployment insurance income. And it used to be, when both those programs were rolled out, they were tax free. The Social Security income started being taxed in 1984 as a consequence of Ronald Reagan slapping a tax on your Social Security income. I don't, right off the top of my head, know when they started taxing unemployment income. I'm guessing it probably was also during the Reagan era, because he was looking for every 16 ways to Sunday to raise taxes on working people so they could cut taxes on billionaires. But I don't have a specific date that I can point to then or at any time. But frankly, I don't believe that unemployment insurance should be taxable. I don't think people should have to pay taxes on it. And if they must pay taxes on it, the government should be taking the deductions in advance so people don't end up with a surprise bill when April 15th rolls around in the next year, because that's what's happening right now. There's going to be 10, 15 million Americans who are going to owe taxes this year for unemployment benefits that they got last year. And frankly, I think it's just wrong that money is called taxable income. These are survival benefits. This is not, hey, let's live high on the hog. Let's make a fancy living and buy a nice house or a nicer house. This is getting by. This is feeding the kids. This is basic stuff. Courtney, thank you for the call. I would love to see a movement within the Democratic Party to put those things on the platform. No more taxation, no more income taxation of Social Security benefits and of unemployment benefits. Or any other kind of welfare benefits. These are direct payments. They should not be considered taxable income. You can find an absolutely fascinating library of my writings, including my daily rants, over at thomhartmann.medium.com. So remember back in 2020 when in California, Uber and Lyft were pouring all kinds of money into Prop 22, which basically would allow them to continue claiming that their drivers weren't actually employers of Uber. They were actually contract workers. They were all independent small businesses. And therefore, the company didn't have to pay for unemployment insurance, didn't have to pay for workman's compensation if somebody got injured, didn't have to offer them any health insurance. In fact, basically couldn't even do it. And there's a whole bunch of other benefits that are associated and protections that you actually get, state and federal protections that you get as an employee that you do not have available to you as a contractor. Well, it passed because of millions of dollars from Uber, and now the fallout is happening. Companies across California are starting to fire their workers and telling them, we'll hire you back. I give examples in our new video over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Ronnie in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Hey, Ronnie, what's up?
Hi there. I tip my hat to you when you talk to Julio because, oh my God, it's kind of hard to listen to him. And I have a couple things to pick on what he said. He said he used two different numbers at two different times. He said that paying union dues that we were paying. I'm a letter carrier for the National Association of Letter Carriers. I've been doing this 31 years, retiring next year. Yay. He said we pay 15 to 20% of our wages to the union, and a different time he said it's crazy and it's a lie. The other time he said, "Oh, so you get $15 an hour and then you give $3 to the union." That is also a lie. Our union dues, and I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's right around $30 every 2 weeks. So it's not even 50 cents a day because you're working 80 hours in those 2 weeks. And his other thing was, and what benefit do you get for it? Well, the benefits are countless. I work a ton of overtime. I work 60 plus hours a week. One of the first benefits is the first 8 hours is straight time. The next 2 hours are time and a half. Anything after 10 is double time. That's a huge benefit that other places won't give you. We earn sick leave. We earn vacation leave. We have a pension. We have great health insurance. The post office did not give us that. It was negotiated by our union leaders.
Exactly.
There's just he's just so wrong in thinking, oh yeah, it was good in the 1800s, but we don't need it anymore. No, very few companies will treat their employees with the same respect that unions demand for their union members. And the last thing I would say, if anyone's unemployed, you can apply at any post office because we are hiring everywhere.
Oh, really? You're looking for people
Yeah.
at post offices. That's great to know.
Yeah. Clerks,
okay, Ronnie.
Clerks and carriers. Yeah, we're shorthanded everywhere.
Great. Well, Ronnie, thank you for that. Thank you for all of that. I appreciate it. And I should have pushed back more directly when Julio was throwing out those percentages because I knew they were nonsense, but it seemed like the bigger argument. But somehow you get lost sometimes. Sarah in Kingman, Arizona. Hey, Sarah, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'd also like to talk about the anti-union guy that called in. So I'm a UPS driver, and these anti-union people can never convince me that being union is a bad thing. FedEx drivers make half of what I make and no benefits. Why would I ever want to subject myself to that?
Right, because FedEx is non-unionized.
Right. We're Teamsters.
Yeah, that's a strong union.
Yeah, one of the best.
I am with you, Sarah, and that's one of the reasons why there's been such a push to privatize the post office to FedEx rather than UPS, because hey, let's break the biggest union. You know, it's the largest unionized workforce in America is the post office. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you.
I'm sure that FedEx is salivating over trying to get the post office.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. I appreciate it. Joe in Parker, Colorado. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hi. I also wanted to chime in on the union dues. My union dues, I started out as a retail clerk for 16 years, and I was a teacher for 22 years. My union dues were 1%.
Yeah.
1% of my salary.
Right. And for that, you got what?
Also, benefits, sick leave, health insurance. We're constantly negotiating for salary increases. I was the treasurer for my local. I got a $350 stipend a month, and I can tell you, when you're working for a nonprofit and you're paying bills every month and you're doing taxes every year, $350 a month is nothing. So the people that are working in these unions, for their members, they are not getting rich.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am completely with you. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for your adding your voice to the chorus here. Jose in Toledo. Hey, Jose, what's up?
Well, after listening to Julio, I was gagging. I can't believe that character. I myself have been a union member all my life, first working with the Farm Labor Organizing Committee in the Toledo area with tomato pickers, and then becoming a UAW worker. And through the UAW, I got my education to become a teacher, and now I'm a member of the Toledo Federation of Teachers. Union has done nothing but raise the level of the quality of my life throughout my whole life. I used to have a debate with my father, who was a truck driver. He said he made good money as a truck driver, and I kept telling him, you make good money because of the threat of a union. Otherwise, they would pay you squat. So, benefits, I have retirement, I have health insurance, everything is the result of the bargaining power of the group rather than singing by yourself.
There you go. Very well said. Jose, thank you so much. Y'all are making the argument so much better than I did, frankly, I think in retrospect. Thank you. We will continue our conversation and more right after this break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Thom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Thom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Thom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Thom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Thom.
Day 2 of this week's Free Speech TV Pledge Drive. Time for you to vote with your phone. 866, excuse me, let me start over again. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. 877-378-8669. Call now and be part of Free Speech TV. One of the most disheartening statistics that I encounter is the number of people who are watching Free Speech TV, and we have a good sense of that. We've actually, hired companies to do like Nielsen tests. I shouldn't say we. Free Speech TV did. It's been a couple of years, but still, the numbers are there. Versus the number of people who actually call in and say, yes, I want to help out. And the number of people who call in and say they want to help out is a tiny, tiny single-digit percentage. A very low single-digit percentage. It varies from year to year, so I'm just going to say it that way. Of the number of people that we are pretty sure are watching. And frankly, I think it's even less than that. Now, that's not unusual. My radio program is also carried on nonprofit radio stations around the country, and I do fundraisers for them also. And we find that similar dynamic. You'll hear that same complaint from your local public radio station. And it's one of the reasons why we need your help in getting more people watching Free Speech TV. If you can please make a commitment during this fund drive to not only help Free Speech TV financially, but also help Free Speech TV grow its viewing audience. And if you can't afford to help financially, here's something that you can do. Can you contribute an hour or two of your time this week to do outreach about Free Speech TV? Getting the word out about Free Speech TV on social media, posting things about it on Facebook, posting things about it on Twitter, posting things about it on whatever social media app you may use, writing about it to your friends, sending just a quick note to friends, neighbors, acquaintances, everybody on your contact list. Hey, I watch Free Speech TV every day. I watch the Thom Hartmann Program on Free Speech TV, and I get so much value from it. You ought to check it out. You can just go to freespeech.org, and you can see how to get it. If you've got Dish or Direct, you can easily get it right off your TV set. If you've got Roku or if you've got Sling, it's right there on your TV set. If you've got Apple TV, you can find it. But if not, you can still get it. You can get it on your computer. You can, cast that to your TV with Chromecast or Applecast or whatever. There's just all kinds of ways to watch Free Speech TV. Share that with your friends and neighbors. As we get more people watching, we will get more people donating. We get more people donating. We can shrink the length of these fund drives, and we can build Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is bringing on new programs. They just started a new program on Facebook Live. They have other new programs that, I saw Jim Hightower on there this morning. This is great stuff. Free Speech TV is really ripping up the pavement here. They're doing some marvelous work. And yet only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people who are consuming Free Speech TV are actually helping pay for it. You can pay for it in one of two ways. You can make a contribution. You can make one-time contributions or regular sustaining contributions, but you can make a contribution. Or you can help get just one other person or two or three more people to be regular viewers of this program or of this network or other programs on this network. If you think that, you have somebody who's a friend who's a total news junkie but isn't all that interested in opinion, point them to Amy Goodman's show. You want somebody who really wants to know what's going on other television networks and everything and hear brilliant kind of talk radio commentary about this? Randy Rhodes' program. If you want, I could go through the list. And I realize that other people on Free Speech TV who represent free speeches in TV in general are already doing that. So I'll stop right there. But my point is, we need to expand our base. And to do that, we need your help. So there's that. Plus, we need cash. Free Speech TV needs money. They have to pay for sending all those electrons up to that satellite that bounces it back down to your house. They have to pay to pump it onto the internet so that you can watch it on your TV set. There are staff costs, there are engineering costs, there's building costs, there's media cost, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just go away because, we're doing good stuff. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With a $20 gift, you have your choice of the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Wildflower Seed Pack. You'll recall that yesterday we had a conversation about wildflowers. Here you go. With a $50 gift, there's the Free Speech TV webcam cover or the new tote bag. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann official program mug or the Free Speech TV hat. With $100, there's the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. $120, the Grow Social Change box, the T-shirt or my book Oligarchy. $240, the Monopolies and Oligarchy. $1,000, show up here. But call now, please. Call now.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I really and truly think we're on the verge of a new era in America. The political winds are shifting so fast. The fact that at CPAC they weren't even bothering to discuss issues, it was all about personality, tells me that what's left of the base of the Republican Party has gone from being people who actually thought that they knew something about policy to a cult of personality. Consider how far the Republican Party has fallen. In 1956, when Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican president of the United States, ran for re-election, this was his platform. You can look it up. It's the 1956 presidential platform on the Republican side. Federal assistance to low-income communities. Extension and expansion of the Social Security program. Asylum for thousands of refugees, expellees, and displaced persons. Extending minimum wage protections, quote, to as many more workers as possible and practicable, end quote. Improving the unemployment benefit system. Protecting the right of workers to organize into unions and to bargain collectively, and to assure equal pay for equal work regardless of sex. That was the GOP platform in 1956. What was the GOP platform in 2020? There wasn't one. It was, well, whatever Donald Trump wants, that's what we're down with. Meanwhile, the Democrats are negotiating and debating right now today in the House of Representatives H.R. 1, the For the People Act, to establish, basically to ensure that everybody in America who is a legal citizen and has a legitimate right to vote can exercise that right without undue burden. And Elizabeth Warren just introduced her into the United States Senate, her 2 and 3% wealth tax for households with $50 million in assets. It's called the Ultra Millionaire Tax Act. She introduced it yesterday. It would put an annual tax of 2% on the net worth of households and trusts between $50 and $1 billion in value, and a 3% tax on those that are worth more than $1 billion. She pointed out on television last night, this would raise $3 trillion. $3 trillion is enough to wipe out all the student debt in America twice. It's enough to fill in all the holes and all the cracks in a national health care system and get it up and running. It's enough to rebuild our schools. It's enough to kick off a Green New Deal kind of infrastructure program. There are so many things that could be done with this. And by the way, you and I are already paying a wealth tax. People say, well, wait a minute. I'm opposed to anybody having to pay a tax on what they own. Well, about 70% of Americans are property owners, are homeowners. I think it's 67%, 2/3. And 100% of those people are paying a tax on their principal asset, their principal store of wealth, which is their home. In fact, owning homes is the principal way that people move from the bottom of the middle class into the middle and upper reaches of the middle class as they get older and as they start saving for retirement. It's the main way that people do that, that families do that. And yet every year you have to pay a tax on your principal wealth, your home. We call it a property tax. It's a wealth tax, pure and simple. In most states, you pay a wealth tax on the value of your car. You pay an annual tax as part of your license tag fee, or sometimes it's, every other year to get a new sticker. And it's based on how much your car costs. Well, that's a wealth tax. So right now we've got a system where really rich people don't pay a wealth tax. But average people, oh yeah, they definitely pay a wealth tax. What's fair and reasonable about that, huh? How is that a good thing? I don't get it. How is it that average Americans, that's 70% of Americans, and by the way, people who rent, they're also paying property taxes. They're just doing it indirectly. Their landlords fold it right into their rent. So really, all of us, all working people, unless you're homeless, are paying an annual tax, an annual wealth tax. Now, it may be on somebody else's wealth. It may be, the property tax in the apartment building where you're renting an apartment, but it's still a wealth tax that is being passed through to you. But if you own your own home, you're paying a wealth tax. And so all Elizabeth Warren is saying, and by the way, the property tax in most states, when you add up the state, county, and local property taxes, and they do kind of stack on top of each other, again, depending on where you live in the country. In some states, it's like, 6-7%. I mean, it gets really high. Elizabeth Warren is proposing 2%, up to $1 billion worth of money bin. All she's saying is that, that property tax that average Americans pay on their homes every year, billionaires should pay that on their money bins. I don't get how anybody can be opposed to this. In fact, if you are opposed to it, please explain to me. She adds, the share of American adults who live in middle-income households has decreased from 61% when Reagan came into office to 51% in 2019. We are watching the middle class just absolutely collapse. And then you get this other question of what are our tax dollars being used for? You'll recall when Dick Cheney was running Halliburton in 1999, when he was the CEO of Halliburton, he engineered a purchase, an acquisition of a company called Dresser Industries. Dresser Industries was a company that sold asbestos. And they had this huge asbestos liability. There were all these lawsuits. They were going to be billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in the hole. But there was legislation working its way through Congress that would have just basically made them whole, and you and I, the taxpayers, would have paid those asbestos liabilities. Cheney made a bet that that legislation was going to pass and had Halliburton acquire Dresser Industries for a song. Turned out that legislation didn't pass, and Dresser just destroyed the value of Halliburton. So when Cheney became vice president, Halliburton was like penny stock. I mean, they were facing bankruptcy. So what does Cheney do? He helps lie us into 2 wars and pass literally tens to hundreds of billions of dollars worth of no-bid contracts, non-competitive contracts to Halliburton, to the company that he still owns stock in. You think Trump was violating the Emoluments Clause? You should take a look at Dick Cheney. And now we get the report from the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. Just came out. The result of Dick Cheney's war so that he could save Halliburton. And they say that the assets that the United States paid for to build schools, prisons, a hotel, hospitals, roads, bridges in Afghanistan. We're rebuilding Afghanistan, not the United States, Afghanistan. They identified about $2.4 billion in assets that were never used and were abandoned. $1.2 billion out of $7.8 billion in assets were being used as intended. Only $1.2 billion out of $7.8 billion and $343.2 million out of $7.8 billion in assets were maintained in good condition. In other words, we threw all this money at Halliburton. They threw up some buildings, built some schools and things. They were crappy. They were never used. They're sitting around rusting and rotting. Halliburton got bailed out. Dick Cheney is richer than sin now. And you and I are still paying for it with our taxes. And all Elizabeth Warren is saying is, hey, why don't the billionaires pay some of these taxes too?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I'm sure she would also say, let's clean up what's going on in Afghanistan. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls after this. And welcome back. Dana in New York City, watching us on Manhattan News Network in Manhattan. Hey, Dana, what's up?
Tom, hi.
Hey.
Yeah, well, I want to preface my question with every time we hear, say, Texas, every time they threaten to secede, and generally people go, well, we'll just see you at the Olympics. It's kind of laughable. The bigger threat is ending up with, say, 5 or 6 mini Texi or 3 Dakotas. If conservatives ever get really serious about trying to maintain a stranglehold on the Senate. And
what do you mean? Are you suggesting that Texas would split itself up in order to have more Republican senators? I don't think so.
That would be the more tangible threat, or the more serious threat than Texas. Every time one of their clowns threatens, secession, it's like, well, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
But in terms of control of the Senate, it's a more viable or realistic threat for these deep red states in the middle of the country to get a.
Here's the problem with that, Dana. There's a secession movement here in Oregon. I've had the people on the show back when I used to do a local show.
Yeah.
Right. There's a California movement. There's a Washington State. They're all over the country. These little secession movements. They're crackpots by and large. They're not taken seriously. I don't think you're going to see any state ever secede. Number one, and number two, I don't think you're going to see these big states break up. The best thing that California could do for the country, and frankly for California, because it would change federal political power, would be to break itself into 3 states. But it ain't going to happen.
Well, to my main question, my main point was about expand. Basically, toward the long-term goal of actually abolishing the Senate. But the first step would be amending the Apportion Act, which controls the size of Congress. Lower the population threshold so that more states have more seats. But I'm not sure if the issue of because the game that is played now is that every 10 years states get House seats stolen by, say somehow South Dakota happens to outgrow California by a percentage point, they get to steal a seat from California.
Well, only if California shrinks.
Because rather than expanding the House.
Oh, you're saying because the number of seats is fixed. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, because they keep raising the population threshold.
Right.
And if they lowered the population threshold per district to say just modestly to back down to 500,000 people per district, California would have 80 electoral votes total, counting the Senate seats.
Yep.
And if you get rid of the stealing mechanism, basically every state automatically gets new seats as their population grows on its own, without other states losing their own seats themselves.
Right.
Which would have the benefit. It would actually encourage immigration. But you want more. If you want more seats, you got to get more people.
Right. You're right.
And because under the this current system, seats get stolen, and then even if it seems impractical, it is a realistic, theory that conservative states could, break up and try to, maintain a stranglehold on the Senate.
Yeah. No, I get that, and I'm skeptical about that, but I do think the Apportionment Act should be amended. I'm with you on that, Dana. Dana, thank you for the call. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. Okay, I want to share just an amazing science story with you. And I'm going to introduce a stretch into this, just my own theory that may be apropos of nothing, but might be really fascinating. I don't know. For the science geeks among us, follow along. This is a study. Neil Greenfield Boyce wrote this for NPR back on February 18th. And the headline is, "Ancient Trees Show When the Earth's Magnetic Field Last Flipped Out." And what they've done is he points out the Earth is a giant magnet because its core is solid iron, and swirling around it is an ocean of molten metal, and it churns and it creates a magnetic field. And every now and then, the North Pole goes someplace other than the North Pole. It's called the Laschamp excursion, LASCHAMP. It's named after a person who identified it, I believe. And the last time this happened was apparently 41,000 years ago, and they're nailing this down very tightly now. They've historically used rock records because there's certain kinds of rock that have enough iron in them that they will magnetize and point in the north-south in the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. But when the magnetic field is moving rapidly, rocks are not. And so it's really hard to tell small, rapid movements in the Earth's magnetic field from rocks. And so what they did was they found some a fossilized forest, 42,000-year-old fossilized forest. And by looking at the rings of the trees and measuring the magnetic direction of the iron or iron-containing compounds in those rings of those trees, here's what they found. They found that, and I'm quoting here from Alan Cooper, an evolutionary biologist who was working on this with a museum in South Australia. He said, the North Pole wandered across North America, right out toward New York, back again across to Oregon. Then it zoomed down through the Pacific really fast to Antarctica and hung out there. This is the North Pole in Antarctica at the South Pole for 400 years, and then shot back up through the Indian Ocean to the North Pole again. He says when this all happened, the magnetic field of the Earth, which maintains the ionosphere and which protects us from electromagnetic radiation, particularly space particles, that it was about 6% of its strength today. Now that's absolutely huge. Now what got me thinking is what happened 42,000 years ago? Well, what happened 42,000 years ago is suddenly, all across the world, we find this in India, we find this in the most famous and first ones that were found were in France. In fact, Louise and I were visiting those caves just a couple of years ago. You find, I don't think there's any in North America at this point, because North America was first populated by humans around 20, 25, 30,000 years ago, but this is 42,000 years ago. But what you find is suddenly two things happened. The Neanderthals and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, Denisovians. The Neanderthals were in Europe. The Denisovians, or however you say that word, were in what we would now refer to as Asia. Those two species of humans vanished after having interbred with human beings, and we're still carrying the DNA from those people. But they vanished, and humans got inside caves. And we've got all this cave painting, all these cave arts. And that seems to be something that led in some very specific directions. There was a completely separate article that was published a couple, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, that I don't have in front of me right now, but that speculated based on, they have grown using Neanderthal DNA. They have grown Neanderthal brain, what are called organelles, little tiny pieces of Neanderthal brain tissue. And it's slightly different from human brain tissue. And it's different in a way that they are speculating caused Neanderthals to have really good spatial cognition, the ability to understand where things were, which would be really important for hunter-gatherers, but not so good at social interactions, whereas humans are really good at social interactions and only moderately good at spatial stuff. And so the theory was that humans started going into caves, human societies started creating, basically societies, or maybe always had been, and that there's strength in numbers, and that's how we wiped out the Neanderthals. But my theory that I'm adding to this, and by the way, the magnetic field of the Earth is now weakening again, is that this is like, Stephen Jay Gould, punctuated evolution. This is one of those moments, one of those bottleneck moments, when two major species of hominids vanished, when the human race made a huge leap forward into art and representation, that ultimately led to things like, written down language and things.
Listening to the Thom
all
Hartmann
because the
Program.
poles shifted.
Call 202
Fascinating stuff, huh?
9925.
Back to your calls after the break. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. Day 2 of this week's Free Speech TV Pledge Drive. Time for you to vote with your phone. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. 877-378-8669. Call now and be part of Free Speech TV. One of the most disheartening statistics that I encounter is the number of people who are watching Free Speech TV, and we have a good sense of that. We've actually, hired companies to do like Nielsen tests. I shouldn't say we. Free Speech TV did. It's been a couple of years, but still, the numbers are there. Versus the number of people who actually call in and say, yes, I want to help out. And the number of people who call in and say they want to help out is a tiny single-digit percentage. A very low single-digit percentage. It varies from year to year, so I'm just going to say it that way. Of the number of people that we are pretty sure are watching. And frankly, I think it's even less than that. Now, that's not unusual. My radio program is also carried on nonprofit radio stations around the country, and I do fundraisers for them also. And, we find that similar dynamic. You'll hear that same complaint from your local public radio station. And it's one of the reasons why we need your help in getting more people watching Free Speech TV. If you can please make a commitment during this fund drive to not only help Free Speech TV financially, but also help Free Speech TV grow its viewing audience. And if you can't afford to help financially, here's something that you can do. Can you contribute an hour or two of your time this week to do outreach about Free Speech TV? Getting the word out about Free Speech TV on social media, posting things about it on Facebook, posting things about it on Twitter, posting things about it on whatever social media app you may use, writing about it to your friends, sending just a quick note to friends, neighbors, acquaintances, everybody on your contact list. Hey, I watch Free Speech TV every day. I watch the Thom Hartmann Program on Free Speech TV, and I get so much value from it. You ought to check it out. You can just go to freespeech.org, and you can see how to get it. If you've got Dish or Direct, you can easily get it right off your TV set. If you've got Roku or if you've got Sling, it's right there on your TV set. If you've got Apple TV, you can find it. But if not, you can still get it. You can get it on your computer. You can, cast that to your TV with Chromecast or Applecast or whatever. There's just all kinds of ways to watch Free Speech TV. Share that with your friends and neighbors. As we get more people watching, we will get more people donating. We get more people donating, we can shrink the length of these fund drives, and we can build Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is bringing on new programs. They just started a new program on Facebook Live. They have other new programs that, I saw Jim Hightower on there this morning. This is great stuff. Free Speech TV is really ripping up the pavement here. They're doing some marvelous work. And yet only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the people who are consuming Free Speech TV are actually helping pay for it. You can pay for it in one of two ways. You can make a contribution. You can make one-time contributions or regular sustaining contributions, but you can make a contribution. Or you can help get just one other person or two or three more people to be regular viewers of this program or of this network or other programs on this network. If you think that, you have somebody who's a friend who's a total news junkie but isn't all that interested in opinion, point them to Amy Goodman's show. You want somebody who really wants to know what's going on other television networks and everything and hear brilliant kind of talk radio commentary about this? Randy Rhodes' program. If you want, I could go through the list. And I realize that other people on Free Speech TV who represent free speeches in TV in general are already doing that. So I'll stop right there. But my point is, we need to expand our base. And to do that, we need your help. So there's that. Plus, we need cash. Free Speech TV needs money. They have to pay for sending all those electrons up to that satellite that bounces it back down to your house. They have to pay to pump it onto the internet so that you can watch it on your TV set. There are staff costs, there are engineering costs, there's building costs, there's media cost, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just go away because, we're doing good stuff. So please call now, 877-378-8669. With a $20 gift, you have your choice of the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Wildflower Seed Pack. You'll recall that yesterday we had a conversation about wildflowers. Here you go. With a $50 gift, there's the Free Speech TV webcam cover or the new tote bag. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann official program mug or the Free Speech TV hat. With $100, there's the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. $120, the Grow Social Change box, the T-shirt or my book Oligarchy. $240, the Monopolies and Oligarchy. $1,000, show up here. But call now, please. Call now. The hidden history of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. There's so much news coming out of the Trump administration, so much corruption, so many crimes. Now they're letting people kill endangered species. Now they're selling off, the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve refuge rather to big oil companies. Now they're they're authorizing pesticides that we know cause birth defects and damage to children. It's just, step after step after step that it's so easy to forget that back in July of 2020, it was reported that Jared Kushner and Mike Pence's nephew, John Pence, created a couple of LLCs, American-Made Media Consultants Corporation, that took $617 million of Trump campaign cash, and nobody knows where it went. I'm telling you, these guys are professional grifters. We need to keep an eye on it. There's a whole rant about it over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Ken in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Ken, what's on your mind today?
Greetings, Tom. I've got a question for you. Perhaps you can check me on my frame. Yes, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Yep.
Got a
okay,
question.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a question for you. Perhaps you can check my framing. We often seem to follow what I would call the right-wing framing on socialism versus capitalism, as if they're antonyms and they're against each other. I don't think so. I think essentially socialism moderates capitalism. Otherwise, we head into corporatism, as Mussolini used to call it. I keep hearing this.
And on the other hand, capitalism provides a certain vitality to socialism, which is what they're doing right now in Cuba.
Exactly. In fact, the Russians, I don't know if you've read this book, I think it's called The Russians. It was by a person who was in Russia. He was a diplomat or something. I think he was actually worked for a paper or something for 30 years. And he said they had their own stores. They had capitalism. But there were no names on them because they didn't want the public to know that the rich and powerful. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, essentially they moderate each other. Now, communism is something totally different.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, and communism works in small communities, and communism is how Jesus ran him and his disciples. There was a common purse. Judas carried it, for example. Communism is how kibbutzes used to run. It's how communes run. It's how a lot of tribes run around the world. But when you reach a size where it's not possible for everybody to know everybody, which seems to be around 150 people, when you exceed that number, communism starts to break down, because then the sociopaths can take advantage of other people, and that's why you need regulation. Or you need to move to another system. And I'm with you, Ken. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of capitalism. There's always going to be people who have great ideas but don't have the means to implement them, and people who have the means to implement them and don't have the great ideas, and capitalism is how they get together. On the other hand, without a good dose of socialism, and I think the best example of this, of course, is in the Northern European and Scandinavian countries. But without a good dose of socialism moderating capitalism, capitalism becomes just a purely brutal force. And that's what we saw in the United States throughout much of the 18th and 19th centuries. And we've figured out how to moderate it. The problem is that capitalism also, unless it's really tightly regulated, and that's mostly through anti-monopoly laws and high levels of taxation, unless it's really tightly moderated, it produces oligarchs. And those oligarchs will try to corrupt government and produce oligarchy, which is where we have been at for the last 10, 15, arguably 20 years in the United States, where government completely ceases to do anything, do the work of the people, and only does the work of the oligarchs. And that then makes a country ripe for revolution, a positive or a negative revolution. But, people just want change. And that, I think, is exactly what you saw in the Trump phenomena. It's what we saw on January 6th, et cetera. So I'm with you. We need a rational mix of the two. Ken, thank you for that. Jim in Herbster, Wisconsin. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hey, good talking with you, Tom. I just turned the TV on a little bit ago, and you had the anti-union guy or whatever on, and it's just...
Yeah, Julio.
It's just nauseating listening to Boobus Americanus that we're having to put up with today. But I was.
But we all have those folks in our families and in our neighborhoods, Jim. I mean, we all do. We need to learn how to talk back to them in a way that doesn't leave blood on the floor.
Yeah, well, I was a special ed teacher and a wrestling coach, and a lifelong union guy, and it's not all about benefits and pay and whatnot. And just while I was waiting, if I could put in one plug, if you want to see what it was like before unions, and even while there still was unions, Scott Noble made Plutocracy 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 for the Internet, almost 2-hour shows with some live footage of demonstrations and how labor was treated by business in this country. And Free Speech TV plays them over and over and over. I watch them. I never go through a week without seeing them on Free Speech TV, and they're brutal to watch. So that's life without a union and with the corporations running the show. Anyway, what I called about was I was a wrestling coach. I was in my 18th year, and I was new at a district, and when we're coaching, I'm working with these special needs students, and some youth coaches that had nothing to do with the school district. I don't want to go into any details, but they decided to have a pro-war. This is back around 90 when Daddy Bush had threatened Saddam Hussein to get out of Kuwait by January 19th, and we had this wrestling meet on January 19th. These youth coaches wanted to have this patriotic thing before the wrestling meet. And I said, no, we are not going to have something like that. And all said and done, we had a youth meet before, which was a great thing, but it was destroyed, in my opinion. And I said, no, you couldn't do it. Well, the night of the meet, there's 3 colored guards. 2 of the guys are board members. And I ended up turning it over to my assistant, talking to the kids, the wrestlers, and telling them I couldn't be a part of this. There was, and all said and done, I got, in the rest of the school year, I got called in, and they ended up firing me. And so if I didn't have a union, I went out and got another job anyway, but, we filed a lawsuit, and we settled out of court, and there's in
other words, your union went to bat for you, and unions are more than just money.
Eroded by administration.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Jim, thank you. That's a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. Kevin in Miami. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Real quick point again about unions. One of the things I was waiting for Julio to talk about was the unions that support police departments. I never hear anybody talking about busting the police unions. Okay? I mean, that is the very reason why they never get prosecuted. It's because they were able to negotiate that through the unions, right, to have I forget the technical term for it. And I just thought that point needed to be made.
Yeah, I agree, Kevin. And it's the one area where I feel that unions have acquired more power than they should because they're protecting, predators and robbers and rapists and whatnot. There needs to be some more reasonable limits on. I'm all in favor of police having the right to be unionized, but cities should not be kowtowing to them the way that they are. And frankly, I have a feeling that as these new contracts come up for renewal, you're going to start seeing a lot of changes. Kevin, thank you for that. Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Well, shout out to Jim there because I know where Herbster, Wisconsin is because that's where both my mom and dad came from. So great. Just wild to hear that. But that I was a union steward for here in Wisconsin, that for Wisconsin Professionals Employees Council, before Scott Walker gutted the unions and said we couldn't negotiate for anything other than salaries, and then had to recertify every 2 years, and it was just more or less made it impossible to be a union the way we were. And that I represented people in more than just that. I mean, it was that I didn't defend lazy people. I mean, sometimes it was just a misunderstanding. Other times it was actually making the employer, follow the contract. I mean, and just a cautionary word to Julio there is the side he supports are the guys who would see a name like Julio and say that's a name we got to strike from the voter rolls. I mean because it just beggars my imagination that he represents that kind of thing, and that he is just wrong. He's wrong on so many things that
Well, a lot of people are wrong.
Right to say it.
Yeah, I know, I get it, and as a person, I like Julio. Politically, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but we all have those people in our lives, and I think we need to figure out how to talk to them. Mark, thank you.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, speaking the truth to multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. And welcome back. John in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, John, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I'm retired now, but in my career, I worked at two different broadcast TV stations as an engineer. First job was in Raleigh, North Carolina, which, as you know, is an ironically called right-to-work state. And the pay was terrible. The company was pretty fair to us with free medical. And eventually, I was part of a small group of people. We held a covert meeting one night with, I think, somebody who was probably, I know he was from New York. I think he was a Teamster, and which didn't go anywhere. And eventually, not long after that, I was put on the graveyard shift, and then shortly thereafter, I was fired. So I think there probably was the names of the people that met were leaked, but be that as it may, I had no other recourse than to go to the State Employment Bureau, and through a series of 3 meetings, I was able to get a fair decision that I was unjustly fired so I could collect unemployment. And my next job was in Los Angeles at a small independent TV station where the pay was just about the same as in North Carolina, and being as the cost of living was that much higher, it was virtually impossible to get by. Now, the company was decent enough to give me small incremental raises so I could make ends meet. And we had an in-house union. It was not unionized except for an in-house union, which really had no clout. The only thing the dues went for were for our meetings, our annual meetings at a nearby deli to pay for the corned beef and pastrami sandwiches. Eventually, we affiliated with IATSE, and we got a whole bunch of back wages, and our salaries jumped up extremely high, competitively with other stations in Los Angeles. Now, they weren't perfect. The reps from the union looked like they were straight out of Goodfellas, and they did sort of back us on a strike, which only lasted 1 week. They didn't even supply us any water. It was the middle of summer. And after a week, they told us, well, we're not going to get our demands. So that was the end of the strike. And I don't know how much longer after that. There were a bunch of layoffs. Fortunately, I was able to stay on.
So what's the point of your story, John?
I'm just saying that I've worked in both union and non-union. I would say that I wouldn't say that the unions, it's not like the lesser of evils. It's not fair to say that, but they're definitely a much more viable way of going as an employee.
I think the formula is really simple. Employers represent organized capital. Workers should have organized workers. I mean, there should be a balance of power here between the organized capital, which is a corporation, and the management, and the workers. It just should be that simple. John, thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the True People's Media. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. Want to know more? The links are all over at thomhartmann.com.
So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at thomhartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now, and this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, "I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land," that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Once upon a time when I was younger, I was a Teamster truck driver, and I would simply like to tell Julio that he owes it to your audience not to lie, okay? Nobody has to pay 20 or 25% of their hourly wage in union dues. I've been out of the industry for a while, but our union dues were never more than 2 hours pay per month. It was usually more like an hour and 2/3 to an hour and 3/4. So it worked out to maybe 1.25% of your wages per month for straight time. And we a whole host of benefits and protections as a result. You couldn't be fired without cause. I had to file a number of grievances during my time in the industry. I lost a couple, but I won several more. The companies were always trying to chip away at the contract, and you couldn't let them do it. I mean, they agreed to this, and under the law, they had to honor it, and they would still try to get out from under provision, so you had to fight them on it. Unfortunately, like so many of my brothers and sisters in trucking and also the airline industry, we eventually lost our jobs in the legacy companies in both businesses, thanks to, as you've told us many times, Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy swallowing the Kool-Aid on deregulation. Probably somewhere 750,000 and 1 million jobs from the late 70s through the 90s in the two industries together. And I also recall that in 1980 and 81, the trucking terminal I was assigned to was about 15 minutes north of O'Hare Field. And the regular pickup and delivery driver for our location who serviced O'Hare Field every day was bringing us back informational pamphlets from the informational picket lines that the PATCO air traffic controllers had set up at all the security entrances to the cargo area of the airport. And I still have this copy of the letter that Ronald Reagan sent to PATCO saying that he appreciated their endorsement and he looked forward to working with them after he took office. And after he did, he just shivved him in the back and broke a union of 13.
They were one of only 2 unions that endorsed him, too.
Yeah. And and the other, in my own industry, I don't know if it's still in print because I haven't read it in quite a while, but there was a weekly publication called Transport Topics. It was the Bible of the trucking industry, and it was always around the terminal. You could read it. And after my company went belly up after 54 years in business, thanks to deregulation, I would go to a college library to read it. And they had an article that explained how deregulation had so affected the industry that 50% of all the freight that was hauled by interstate common carriers in 1980 was hauled by companies that were out of business by 1990. So I don't know how anybody can say deregulation had some kind of economic success except for the people at the top. I mean, the last day my company was in operation, I was, like I said, a lot younger then. I was standing there with grown men that I respected, older guys who had fought in combat in World War II in Korea and in their 40s and 50s, and they're standing there with tears going down their faces because they didn't know where they were going to go or what they were going to do, knowing how hard it is to get hired when you're that old. And, it just isn't right for people who sacrifice their country to be treated that way. But that's what America has been for the last 40 years. And we've had 2 generations of this. And I just wish the Democrats would fight harder. The Freedom of Choice Act has to be passed and soon. And work has to be done to repeal the Taft-Hartley Act, or we're never going to make any progress as working people.
I agree. And that's what this PRO Act moves a good step forward in that direction. I'm with you. George, I want to get one more call in here. Thank you. Terry in Bellwood, Illinois. Hey, Terry, what's up?
Hi, I was calling about the union. I'm just so blessed to have worked for the union. And whenever I got hired at the company, it was a man's company, but I got hired. My pay was $3.21 an hour. My skill was a stenographer, executive secretary. They had an opening, 2 openings, but they did not even give me the test because I was a black girl. But the union stood up for me, but I didn't know about unions. I thought they was going to make me lose my job. But after I got through, I was making $8-something an hour. 2 weeks later, I raised 4 kids, single parent. all 4 of them went to college. All 4 of them have a job, but they had to take out private loans because we made too much on my salary.
God bless you, Terry. Terry, thank you for sharing your story. It's so great to hear from you. And thanks for listening to us on WCPT. It's the end of the show. We'll see you tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. We have to participate. There's so many ways you can participate in democracy, and you can support media that supports democracy. This is a critical time. So many of our stations are also in pledge drive or trying to sell advertising, so help them out. Hey, get out there, get active, tag You're It. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Thom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Thom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Thom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Thom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Thom.